Hi there, and welcome to the Live It Loud podcast. My name is Maya. I go by Live It Loud Maya on all social media platforms. If you don't know me, hi and welcome. If you're watching or if you're listening, I'm very happy to have you here. In this podcast, we're going to be talking about all things culture, faith, motherhood, and politics. And our last episode, we kind of went over using your voice in a culture that tells you to stay silent. And this episode is going to be somewhat of a segue into an issue that I'm really passionate about and that I really care about, which is abortion. So today we're going to be getting into 3 simplified reasons why you should be pro-life and why you should care about abortion, because I feel like not a lot of people are having conversations about this. So that's what we're going to be diving into today. Just to give you a little bit of context, because you might be like, why is she talking about this? What qualifications does she have? Why does she care about it? I've been a pro-life advocate now for over 4 years, almost 5 years. I work with a nonprofit called liveaction.org and work with creating educational and heart-changing content about abortion. And I also do some personal advocacy myself, just volunteering on my own. I work with a couple pregnancy centers in my local area and I donate to them. This topic has always really been heavy on my heart. But before I got into my pro-life advocacy, I knew abortion was wrong, but I never knew why. And so looking into educational resources, apologetics, diving deep into my Bible, those were all things I really got into. And I really wish I would have had a resource that would have given me just like the basic apologetics. I feel like if you're learning apologetics about abortion, or you're trying to learn, more about your pro-life beliefs, trying to strengthen your pro-life beliefs, you kind of really have to research really hard. So I wanted to have a place where, I could look for these simple pro-life arguments, or how to debate specific pro-choice arguments just all in one place. And so hopefully this podcast will be that for you today. In this first episode, we're just been going over some simplified reasons why you should be pro-life, but come future episodes, we're really going to be diving deep into how to answer some hard questions and also like a biblical perspective of being pro-life. So we're going to dive kind of into that. When I started posting online and doing my pro-life advocacy, I really knew that I was pro-life, but I didn't know why, like I said before. And so it was really important to me to learn more. And I started getting into debates. I started doing, live debates online, reading up on apologetics, making rebuttals and posts. And really, that's what we're going to do today. I know for some people, maybe you're watching this, it's hard for you to vocalize or defend why you're pro-life. So I'm going to give you some tools today that hopefully inspire you and helps you to be more unapologetically pro-life and more vocal about your pro-life beliefs, but also helps you to articulate it in a way that is spoken with compassion and with care, because this issue is not a black and white issue, right? A lot of people like to make it a black and white issue, but it's really not. A lot of women who are choosing abortion are not choosing abortion because they want to kill their baby, right? They're choosing abortion because maybe they feel like they don't have any other options. Maybe they feel like they don't have enough resources, and that is an issue that has to stem from our culture being anti-family, right, which leads to being anti-life. That's a whole nother topic of conversation, but this is how it's been in the West for decades now. We've been experiencing this. We've been seeing this lie, this propaganda that's been pushed out that says that women need to kill their babies in order to have success, or women need to kill their babies in order to have freedom, and those things are just not true. They're the furthest thing from the truth. So we're going to be getting into how to handle those hard conversations, like I said in a future episode, but we have to cover the simple why first. This is just the basics. Why should you be pro-life? Why is it important that you be educated about it? And why is it important that you care? These are the 3 questions I have today. So find your why. This is kind of the point of this episode, is why be pro-life, right? Why even care about this? So we're going to dive into this today. Before I want to get into this episode, I just want to say that all opinions I share in this podcast are my own and not a representative of liveaction.org that I mentioned before. If you have any questions or want to find more resources from Live Action after listening, I'll include a link in the episode description for Live Action's website so you can dive a little bit deeper into some more pro-life apologetics or find some more resources wherever you need. I'm also going to be referencing my notes a lot in this episode because I want to stay on topic and keep everything as clear as possible for you. So that's enough rambling. Let's get into this. All right, so I give you my 3 questions. Why should you be pro-life? Why is it important to be educated about it? And why should you even care? The simple answer is you should care about abortion because every human life has value from the very beginning. The most vulnerable deserve protection. Being educated about it helps us understand the science, the morality, and the real-life consequences so we can respond thoughtfully instead of relying on emotion and misinformation. Caring about life, it's about justice, it's about compassion, and standing up for those who cannot defend themselves, which leads me to my first point, which we're going to get into 3 points as to why it's important to be pro-life. And this first point is a hard hitter, okay? Now, these things, like I said, are going to be very simplified. We're not getting into hard topics or conversation. This is the simple why. And my first why, and this is the first thing that I discovered when I was getting into my pro-life advocacy, was number 1, being every single human life has intrinsic value. Intrinsic value means that all human beings have worth simply because they are human, not because of what they can do, contribute, feel, or achieve. Intrinsic value is the only foundation that allows us to say that all humans deserve equal rights. It gives us the belief that value is not based upon age, size, or ability or circumstances. It's inherent. Human rights are for all human beings. And if we deny protection to some, we undermine the idea of equality itself. Any standard other than human, right, which is age, development, location, or dependency, is arbitrary, and history shows what happens when societies define some humans as less than. There is no clear, non-arbitrary moment when value suddenly appears. So this is the first strong point for being pro-life, is recognizing that we all have intrinsic value. It doesn't matter what you can contribute to society. It's because you are a human, you qualify for human rights, period. It doesn't matter if you're 100 years old and you're on your deathbed, you're 50 years old, you're 30 years old, you're a baby, or you're a baby in the womb. From the point that someone becomes a human being, they have value until the day that they die. From the womb to the tomb, every single human being has equal value. And the main reason that this is important when arguing against abortion or deciding why you're going to be pro-life is because abortion depends on assigning different levels of value to different human beings based on development or dependency. Defending intrinsic value exposes that framework as arbitrary and dangerous, because once we consider some human beings excluded from protection, human rights become a matter of power and preference and also convenience rather than justice and equality. And this is super important. This is a very important framework when you're talking about pro-life beliefs, because humans have value because it is inherent. This is either rooted in our shared humanity, which demands equal rights and dignity, or from a biblical perspective in God's design, which makes every life sacred from the beginning. So whether you're arguing this from a biblical perspective or a secular perspective, no matter what, human life has intrinsic value. Now, in my opinion, somewhat it is hard to discuss abortion and why you care about human life having intrinsic value with people who don't believe the Bible, because of course if you don't believe that humans were made with a purpose or made with like intelligent design, of course you're not going to see the value of human life. And so I definitely think that there is a little bit more of a deeper, stronger belief of being pro-life with a biblical perspective, but I do believe you can present a pretty strong secular perspective from this as well, with abortion, because like I said, our shared humanity is what gives us our intrinsic value as that shared humanity. If you're going to defend a pro-life position, you have to acknowledge the humanity of babies in the womb first. That is the first and most important thing, which leads me into my second point, which is life begins at conception. This is a very well-known scientific fact. Science confirms this, that a new genetically unique human life begins at fertilization with the embryo's conception. This matters because human rights must be grounded in objective reality. We cannot just make arbitrary lines of like, oh, life begins at first breath, life begins at viability, life begins when the baby has a heartbeat, because all of that is wishy-washy. We need a set point. It has to be grounded in reality and objective reality. If science shows that a human life begins at conception, then human rights should begin where that human life begins. Otherwise, rights become conditional based on size, based on location or convenience, rather than the humanity itself. When we deny scientific truth, we replace justice with emotion and power, and the most vulnerable always pay the price for this. Throughout history, we've seen this so many times. No further qualification should be needed to be human because DNA defines it. Period. Easy peasy. Denying science allows emotion and convenience to replace what is true. If you ask pro-choicers, if you ask people who are pro-abortion, when does life begin? They're always going to give you a different answer. Never one time have I consistently heard someone who argues in favor of abortion have a consistent timeline for when human life begins. Some say viability, like I said before. Some say first breath. Some say, earlier, like heartbeat or brain waves or something like that. And some people just say like, not, after the baby's born, whatever. So there's no clear line for when life begins. So as pro-lifers, we have to have, this is what science says. This is true. Although someone may not attribute value to that life because they are so early in their development, that is still the truth. That is the objective truth and what science is clear about. So like I said, if we acknowledge intrinsic value for all human beings, then that would include preborn children, because we know when science says a unique human life begins. So those things kind of go together, which leads me to my last point, and this is the last simplified point, that killing innocent human beings is always wrong. Easy peasy. right? This is like the basics. We're just covering all those simple basic things. Killing innocent humans is always wrong, and history shows the danger of deciding who counts as human. And I put that in quotation, who counts, right? We saw this with slavery and the Holocaust. They proved dehumanization leads to destruction. We've seen this so many times throughout history. When there are strong people in power deciding whose lives are worth taking and whose lives are worth living, we always see the innocent suffer. The preborn are the most vulnerable amongst us in our society, and if we have a duty to protect children after birth, and our responsibility as adults is to protect children after birth, then it should follow that we do the same thing before they're born too. That responsibility should logically begin before birth. This makes abortion a moral contradiction because it ends innocent human life rather than defending it. This is an important point to note if you're taking notes. These are super simplified main 3 things that are important to talk about when it comes to abortion. Being pro-life, it's not about wanting to control women like many people might say. It is about protecting human rights for all. We have to approach this with truth. We have to approach it with compassion and courage. And you don't have to be an expert to speak up about it, right? You don't have to know everything about abortion. You just have to be someone who cares. You just have to care enough to say something about it and care enough to say this is a huge injustice that's going on. Millions of babies are killed every single year in America. There's something that needs to be done. You just have to be someone who cares and care enough to educate yourself and care enough to learn about it. When you talk about this issue, you're going to get pushback. You're going to get haters. You're going to get people who don't understand the why behind being pro-life. But now you know your why. And that's what's most important. So now you understand the why behind being pro-life. I hope this episode helped you, helped break it down, and helped encourage you. Obviously, this episode is a little bit shorter. We're not diving into super deep topics yet, but we're going to get there. Don't worry. I'd love to dive deeper into this, obviously, but we're running out of time. So stay tuned for the next episode where we're going to be answering hard questions. We're going to be diving into some of the common pro-abortion, pro-choice argument, how to respond to those with compassion, how to respond to those with truth, and answering those hard questions. So subscribe for future episodes where we're going to be also getting into biblical perspectives about this. Thanks so much for listening. I'll see you in the next one.